Police officers beat a girl into a coma, but Ronda Rousey and Chuck Norris showed what happens when you mess with the wrong person. Subscribe and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. The heat hung low over San Pinto like an invisible weight, thick and unmoving. Dust gathered in the cracks of sidewalks and in the air itself, as if the entire town had paused just long enough to forget it was alive. Beneath the faded sun, a battered gray sedan rolled slowly down a narrow street lined with modest single-story homes. The engine coughed as it climbed the last hill before turning into the gravel driveway of house number 1184. Nora Martinez sat silently in the passenger seat, her legs pulled up beneath her, arms folded tightly. The sleeves of her hoodie were tugged down over her hands even in the heat, the fabric chewed raw at the cuffs. Beside her, her mother, Teresa, shifted the gear into park and let out a tired sigh. "This is it," Teresa said, though it didn't sound like hope. It sounded like surrender. The house was small, no more than 4 rooms. The paint had peeled at the edges of the window frames, and the porch leaned just enough to be noticed. A drooping lawn chair sat abandoned in the corner, and the mailbox hung by a single rusted nail. But it was affordable. More importantly, it was safe. Or so Teresa thought. Nora didn't reply. She opened the car door and stepped out, gravel crunching beneath her worn sneakers. Her backpack was slung over one shoulder, the other strapped loose and trailing. She didn't look around. She didn't need to. This wasn't the kind of place you admired. It was the kind of place you survived. Teresa followed her daughter up the porch steps with a ring of keys and a determined jaw. She was 36 but looked older, the kind of older that comes not from time but from burden. Her hands trembled slightly as she unlocked the door and pushed it open. Inside was nothing but dust and quiet. That night, as Teresa unpacked kitchen boxes and sorted through second-hand dishes, Nora sat cross-legged on the bare mattress in her new room, a sketchbook on her lap. She drew with mechanical calm, lines, eyes, expressions, empty rooms filled with silence. Her pencil never paused, even as the wind outside began to whistle through cracks in the siding. She didn't draw to express. She drew to contain. The next morning came too fast. Teresa's alarm rang at 5:30 a.m., and by 6:15 she was dressed for her shift at the diner on 3rd. Nora sat at the kitchen table staring at a bowl of cereal she didn't touch. Her backpack rested at her feet like a stone. "You don't have to be scared," Teresa said gently. "Just be yourself." Nora looked up. "That's what scares them," she replied. At 7:45, a school bus pulled up to the corner. Nora climbed on without a word. The ride to San Pinto High was short, only 6 miles, but the transition felt like falling through different layers of air. From the safe, if decaying, quiet of her home to the tension inside the yellow steel of the bus. No one spoke to her. She didn't expect them to. The other kids, mostly white, well-fed, well-dressed, gave her the same look, a combination of curiosity and dismissal. When the bus hissed to a stop in front of the school, Nora stepped off and froze for just a second. San Pinto High loomed like a courthouse. The architecture was dated. Too many columns, not enough windows. The campus was spread out across several low-slung buildings connected by covered walkways. A tall metal fence bordered the perimeter, and a small guard post stood near the entrance, complete with a campus police SUV parked beside it. Nora adjusted her backpack and kept walking. Inside, the school buzzed with artificial energy. Students filled the halls with laughter and the squeak of rubber soles on linoleum. Teachers shouted greetings over the noise. Nora moved through it like smoke, unnoticed at first, until she wasn't. In her third period English class, she was introduced as our new transfer from Los Angeles. That alone was enough to spark whispers. By lunch, people had already filled in the blanks themselves. She's from South L.A. I heard her dad was in a gang. She was expelled from her last school for stabbing a girl. I bet she's in juvie probation. Nora sat alone under a tree at the far end of the quad, her sketchbook open but untouched. At 2:45, the final bell rang and the halls emptied quickly. She made her way to the front gate, where a row of yellow school buses waited. That was when she saw him for the first time. Sergeant Dean Marshall stood near the security booth in full uniform, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding his expression. Late 40s, pale skin sunburned at the neck, crew-cut hair turned gray at the temples. He didn't smile, didn't nod, he just watched. Something in his stance, the weight shifted too far forward, the tension in his jaw, felt wrong. "Student ID," he said as she walked past. She hesitated, pulling it from the lanyard around her neck. He looked it over too long before handing it back without a word. The next day, he did the same. By the end of the first week, Nora had memorized every inch of his posture. The way he always stood with one hand near his belt. The way he scanned the courtyard but always returned to her. The way he didn't speak unless he wanted to unsettle. Teresa started noticing bruises, small ones, on her daughter's wrist and forearm. Nora claimed she bumped into her desk, tripped over a bench, always calm, always vague. "She's just not fitting in," a school counselor told Teresa during their first meeting. "She doesn't engage, doesn't participate." "She's quiet," Teresa said. "That's not a crime." The counselor gave a sympathetic smile that didn't touch her eyes. 2 weeks in, Nora was late getting home. When she finally walked through the door, she moved slowly, her steps uneven. "What happened?" Teresa asked, rising from the kitchen table. "Nothing. I fell. It's fine." But it wasn't fine. There was a purple shadow spreading across her lower back. The next morning, Teresa called the school. She demanded answers. The secretary transferred her to voicemail. No one returned her call. 2 days later, Nora was stopped again by Sergeant Marshall. "Where are you going?" he asked, stepping into her path. "To class. You're outside of designated zones. You know the rules." "I have 5 minutes." "I make the rules," he said. He made her turn out her backpack, books, sketchpad, pencils. He thumbed through the drawings without permission. One of them showed a large figure looming over a smaller one. He studied it too long. "You into violence?" he asked. "No," she replied quietly. He smirked and let her go. That evening, Teresa made another call, this time to the police department itself. The desk officer was polite but dismissive. "All school security issues are handled on site, ma'am." "He's a city officer," she said, "not just school staff. We trust our officers to do what's necessary to keep the school safe." And just like that, the door closed. Weeks passed. Nora learned to keep her head down lower. The whispers became background noise. The stares turned to silence. Marshall's presence never changed. Then came Friday. It started like every other morning. Cereal she didn't eat, a half-hearted "have a good day" from her mother, the long bus ride in. The sky was cloudless, the air held a strange stillness. At 2:10, with only one class left, Nora was summoned to the main office over the intercom. The secretary didn't look up when she entered. "Principal Davis will see you shortly," she said. Nora sat. She waited. 20 minutes passed. Finally, a tall woman in a pantsuit stepped out of the office, glanced at her, and nodded toward the hallway. As she stood, she noticed a second figure waiting at the far end. Sergeant Marshall, arms folded, face unreadable. She followed them into a small room near the back of the building. It had no windows, only a desk, 2 chairs. When the door clicked shut, Nora's heart began to race. She didn't know it then, but she would never walk out the same. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, Nora felt the weight of the room settle on her chest. It wasn't just the lack of windows or the buzzing fluorescent light overhead. It was the way the air itself felt wrong, stale, like it had been trapped there for too long. Principal Davis sat stiffly behind the desk, fingers interlaced, eyes unreadable. Beside her stood Sergeant Dean Marshall and Officer Tom Gilbert, both in uniform. Gilbert leaned against the wall casually, arms crossed. Marshall remained standing, unmoving, like a slab of concrete. "Take a seat," Davis said. Nora obeyed, dropping into the hard plastic chair. Her knees barely fit beneath the desk. Her palms pressed flat against her thighs. "We've received a report," Davis began, her tone overly even. "A serious one." Nora blinked. "From who?" "A student," Davis said. "Anonymous, but credible. They claim you made a threatening remark in class. Something about hurting someone if they kept bothering you." Nora stared at her. "That's not true." Marshall stepped forward. "You've had issues adjusting here, haven't you? Not fitting in? A little short-tempered, maybe? I haven't hurt anyone." "Words can be threats," Gilbert added, smiling just a little too much, especially from someone with a volatile background. "I don't have a background." "You're from Los Angeles," Marshall said flatly. "High-tension school district, high incidence of violence. We know what we're looking at." "I never said anything." Davis raised a hand. "We're not accusing you, Nora, but we need to follow protocol. You'll be temporarily suspended while we conduct an investigation." Nora felt her heart drop into her stomach. "For something I didn't say?" Marshall's voice darkened. "You can write a statement admitting the outburst. We close the matter quo ically. Or we escalate." "I didn't say anything," she repeated, barely above a whisper. Gilbert's tablet beeped. He glanced at the screen. "Parents have been notified," he said. "You'll wait in the holding room until they arrive." "I want to call my mom," Nora said. "Later," Marshall replied, already opening the door. They walked her down a back hallway, not the main corridor, not where students might see her. The walls narrowed, lights flickered. The holding room wasn't much bigger than a closet. No windows. One metal chair bolted to the floor. No cameras. Gilbert stood outside the door. Marshall stayed inside, blocking the way back out. Nora sat. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She kept her hands folded in her lap and tried to stay still. "You think you're clever," Marshall said after a long silence. "You think being quiet makes you invisible." She didn't answer. "But I see you. We all see you. You don't belong here. You know it. We know it. It's only a matter of time." "I haven't done anything." Marshall stepped closer. "You're a problem. You're going to become a bigger one. We're nipping it early." He moved toward her, close enough that she could smell the cologne and sweat on his uniform. His hand rested on the butt of his baton. Just resting. No threat. Not officially. "You know what happens when people don't listen?" he asked. Nora stared at the floor. Marshall smiled. Gilbert re-entered. "Van's here. Let's go." Outside, students watched from a distance as Nora was walked to a police transport vehicle flanked by both officers. She kept her head down. Her hood was up. Her hands trembled in her sleeves. They didn't take her home. They didn't take her to a precinct either. Not right away. Instead, they drove to the back entrance of the San Pinto Department of Public Safety. The lot was empty. The building silent. It was after hours. "You're being held for observation," Marshall said. "For what?" "You fit the description of a recent vandalism report." "That's not even what—" "Step out." She did. The hallway they led her down was darker than it should have been, echoing tile, fluorescent lights that hummed too loudly. They took her to a side cell, not a full holding cell, but a repurposed supply room with a bench and a sink. Marshall opened the door. Gilbert stood behind her. When she hesitated, Marshall shoved her. Nora stumbled in. The door slammed shut. She sat on the bench, silent. An hour passed, then 2. No one came. At 10:43 p.m., the door opened again. "You've got a mouth on you," Marshall said, stepping inside. "Let's see how far it gets you tonight." What followed wasn't loud. There were no alarms, no yelling, no struggle that echoed down the halls. What happened was quiet, calculated, deliberate. Marshall struck first, a baton to the ribs. Controlled, no broken skin, then a knee to the stomach. He didn't leave marks, not immediately. Gilbert watched, didn't intervene, just turned his back to the camera, as if it might be on. It wasn't. Nora collapsed to the floor, coughing, breathless. When she tried to rise, Marshall struck her again. The baton landed on her thigh, just above the knee. "Stop resisting," Gilbert said without irony. "I'm not," she whispered. Marshall knelt beside her, grabbed her shoulder and slammed her backward. Her head hit the concrete with a dull crack. Her vision blurred. A high-pitched ringing filled her ears. She stopped speaking. Gilbert turned her over roughly, checking for her phone. There wasn't one. Her backpack had been left in the office. Another blow came, to the lower back. She gasped, then went still. Gilbert crouched beside her and pressed 2 fingers to her neck. "Still breathing," he said. "Barely," Marshall muttered. They left her there, alone, unconscious. At 1:22 a.m., a janitor walking past the corridor noticed the open door. He stepped inside, saw the crumpled figure on the floor, and called it in. The paramedics arrived 13 minutes later. She had a concussion, 3 fractured ribs, internal bruising, a spinal contusion. She didn't wake up. By the time Teresa arrived at the hospital, it was nearly dawn. She wasn't allowed to see her daughter at first. The nurse at the desk told her, "She's being stabilized." Teresa didn't scream. She didn't shout. She stood perfectly still, one hand gripping the strap of her purse until her knuckles turned white. When they finally led her into the ICU, she almost collapsed. Nora lay on the hospital bed, surrounded by machines. A breathing tube threaded down her throat. Her face was swollen. Her skin had gone pale, mottled. The monitors beeped in slow rhythm. "What happened to her?" Teresa asked. The nurse hesitated. "The police report said she was found collapsed, alone." "That's a lie." "I'm sorry," the nurse said quietly. "We don't have more than that." Teresa sat beside her daughter, took her hand, and whispered her name again and again. No response. The official police report, released the next day, stated that the student had suffered a medical episode during detention and had fallen. They claimed there were no witnesses, no footage, no misconduct. The school refused comment. A week passed. Nora didn't wake up. The bruises faded slowly, but the swelling in her brain remained. Her fingers twitched once, then didn't again. Teresa contacted lawyers. They gave her polite sympathy and declined the case. Too risky, not enough proof. The system protects its own. By the second week, she had stopped calling anyone. She simply sat in the hospital every day, waiting. Then, on the morning of the 12th day, she made one final call, not to a lawyer, not to a reporter, but to someone she hadn't spoken to in months. The voicemail picked up after 2 rings. "Rhonda," Teresa said, her voice breaking for the first time. "It's me. It's Nora. They hurt her. She's in a coma. I need you." She hung up. 2 hours later, Ronda Rousey booked a red-eye flight. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. The jet descended through a blanket of early morning haze, wheels screeching lightly as it touched down at Los Angeles International. Ronda Rousey stepped off the plane in a zippered hoodie and dark sunglasses, a duffel bag slung across her shoulder. Her expression was unreadable, not grief, not rage, not yet. Just stillness, taut and compressed like a muscle holding tension beneath the skin. She didn't stop to check messages or grab a coffee. She didn't need to, she already knew. She bypassed the main terminal and headed directly for the car lot, climbing into a rented black SUV without a word. The drive from LAX to San Pinto was just over 2 hours, but it felt shorter. She didn't put on music, didn't take a call. Her mind worked in quiet loops, calculating, narrowing in on the pain she'd heard in Teresa's voice. Rhonda had trained for violence, fought in cages, on mats, in front of roaring crowds. She'd dislocated joints, broken noses, and made world-class opponents cry uncle. But nothing in her career had ever prepared her for the image she saw when she walked into the ICU. Nora was pale. Too pale. The bruising along her side had yellowed, but the damage beneath the skin was deeper than any color could show. A breathing tube emerged from between her lips, connected to a machine that hissed in a steady rhythm. Electrodes dotted her scalp, and an IV line disappeared beneath the blanket. Her small hand lay motionless beside her. Teresa sat in the corner of the room, hunched forward in a plastic chair. Her face was gray with exhaustion. When she looked up and saw Rhonda standing in the doorway, something inside her broke. "She hasn't moved," Teresa said. Rhonda didn't speak. She crossed the room slowly and sat beside the bed. Her hand reached forward, gently brushing a strand of hair from Nora's forehead. Then she took the girl's hand and held it, firm but soft. The fingers didn't tighten in response, not yet. "Who did this?" she finally asked. Teresa hesitated. "Police," she said. "School police. 2 of them. Sergeant Dean Marshall and Officer Tom Gilbert. They said she made threats in class, called her aggressive, took her into some kind of room. She never walked out of it." Rhonda's face didn't change, but her grip did, just slightly. Her thumb pressed into the inside of Nora's wrist, a reflex from a lifetime of holds and locks. Then she released. "The hospital?" Rhonda asked. "Wrote it off, said it was too late to do anything different. The report says she fell during detainment. No cameras, no witnesses, no one to blame. No proof." Rhonda nodded once. Teresa looked at her. "You don't have to stay. I didn't know who else to call." "You did the right thing," Rhonda said. Her voice was calm, steel wrapped in velvet. She stood. "I'll be back tonight." Teresa blinked. "Where are you going?" Rhonda glanced at the monitor, then at the door. "To find help." By noon, Rhonda was sitting in the back of a quiet bar in East Hollywood, her phone on the table in front of her. The screen was dark, but she wasn't looking at it. She was waiting. At 12:16, the bell above the door rang, and a man in a baseball cap and black jacket stepped inside. He walked with a subtle limp, the kind you only noticed if you were trained to see how bodies moved when they didn't want to show weakness. He found her without scanning the room. "Rhonda," he said with a short nod, pulling out the chair across from her. "Chuck," she said. Chuck Norris removed his cap, revealing gray hair cropped short. He looked older than the last time they'd met. Lines etched deeper into his face, but there was no mistaking the coiled alertness in his frame. The man may have retired from public life, but he hadn't softened. "They hurt a kid?" he asked. Ronda passed him a printout. Medical reports, photos, a single-page summary. He read in silence, then set the paper down, hands folded neatly. "What's the play?" he asked. "We go in, we find out everything. We dismantle it piece by piece." Chuck nodded. "I'll need names, records, patterns." "I'm already working on it," she said, pulling out a second folder. "This is what Teresa gave me. There are inconsistencies in the school timeline. A janitor called in a report, but it disappeared. 2 other students claim they saw Nora being walked out, but no one followed up." Chuck flipped through the documents, already calculating. "This Gilbert guy," he said, stopping on one name. "He trained at a gym in Riverside I used to visit, still spars on Saturdays." Rhonda's mouth tightened. "He used her as a bag." Chuck looked up. "We'll make him one." By the next morning, they were embedded. Chuck set up in a rented cabin outside San Pinto. Quiet, off-grid. From there, he launched background scans. He contacted old friends in military policing, pulling non-public data on the 2 officers. It wasn't hard. Neither Marshall nor Gilbert had clean files. Marshall had 3 sealed internal investigations, 2 for excessive force, 1 for falsified records. All dismissed. No charges. Gilbert had a domestic complaint, also sealed. A quiet settlement. Ronda moved through the town like smoke. She walked the halls of San Pinto High unannounced, posing as a district consultant. She studied the layout, found the room where Nora had been held, still unlocked, still unmonitored. She photographed everything. The hallways, the camera placements, the badge scanners. She spoke to a secretary who stammered when asked about the night of the incident. At the hospital, she received a flash drive from an anonymous nurse. On it was a partial export of the night log, time-stamped, student, female, minor, admitted with trauma, unconscious. Officer escort, Sergeant Dean Marshall, condition critical. No report had ever been filed with the district. That night, Ronda sat across from Chuck in the cabin, a corkboard spread out between them. Photos, names, timelines. "This wasn't random," she said. "Marshall's been doing this for years. Nora was just quieter than the others. Couldn't fight back." Chuck leaned forward. "Then we fight for her." The next day, Ronda returned to the gym where Gilbert sparred on weekends. A gritty, industrial place with no air conditioning and mats that reeked of bleach and sweat. She paid cash for a drop-in slot, wearing a mouth guard and hoodie pulled low. No one recognized her. Not at first. Gilbert was in the center ring, sparring with a younger man. He laughed as he landed a hook, ducked a jab, spun out. He moved like someone who didn't expect consequences. She waited until his 3rd round ended. "Next," the trainer called. "I'll take him," Ronda said. Gilbert turned, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked her up and down, dismissive. "You sure, sweetheart?" Ronda pulled the hood tighter. The bell rang. The first minute was feints, jabs, light movement. She let him underestimate her, let him get comfortable. Then she dropped the act. A right cross split his guard. He stumbled. She pressed forward, elbow, body shot, knee to the hip. He backed away, stunned. "What the?" She spun, hooked his ankle, dropped him on his back. Gasps echoed. She pinned him with a knee to his sternum. "Get off me," he snarled. She pulled her hood back. Recognition washed over his face like ice. "You." "Me," she said. He reached for her. She snapped his wrist. The scream was high and sharp. Nobody moved to stop her. As she stood, she looked at the trainer. "Call an ambulance," she said. "He'll need it." Then she walked out. No fanfare, no cameras, just justice. That night, Chuck followed Marshall's cruiser as it left the station. He waited until the sergeant stopped at a roadside bar, the same one he visited every Thursday night. Marshall stepped out, rolled his shoulders, and lit a cigarette. Chuck was already behind him. "Evening," Chuck said. Marshall turned halfway through his first drag. "Do I know you?" Chuck's punch landed clean, just beneath the ribs. Marshall doubled over, choking. Chuck caught him by the collar and drove him against a wall. "You beat a kid," Chuck said, low. "I didn't." Chuck hit him again, not for rage, for memory. Elbow, knee, fist. Marshall dropped. Chuck stood over him, breathing steady. "This is your last patrol," he said. Marshall didn't answer. Couldn't. Chuck walked away. The next morning, both officers were in separate hospitals. Gilbert's wrist was shattered in 3 places. Marshall had a fractured jaw and 2 broken ribs. Their official reports cited unidentified assailants. But in quiet rooms behind closed doors, a name began to spread. A name whispered by the same voices that once called for her in the ring. Ghost. And the ghost had returned. Not for fame, not for vengeance, but for the child they tried to erase. And she wasn't done yet. By sunrise, the town of San Pinto was already humming with low-level discomfort. Whispers had begun to crawl through the cracks of silence, trickling from precinct hallways to school corridors, from hospital wards to late-night diners. No one said it out loud, not at first, but everyone knew something had happened. 2 officers in the hospital, no suspects, no answers, and just beneath the surface, fear. Ronda Rousey sat alone at the kitchen table in the small rented house near the hospital. The duffel bag lay open beside her, half unzipped, revealing worn wraps, a mouthguard, and a folded Olympic judo hoodie. Her hair was still damp from the cold shower she'd taken an hour earlier. In front of her, the corkboard was back out, covered in notes, sketches, arrows, a web of names, and silence. She sipped water slowly, her face unreadable. Chuck entered without knocking. He moved like he always had, quiet, controlled, purposeful. "They moved Gilbert to Riverside Trauma," he said. She nodded once. "Marshall's being discharged tomorrow. Broken jaw, fractured ribs, mild concussion. No charges filed." "Of course not," Ronda said. "They're scared." "They should be." Chuck sat across from her and slid over a manila folder. "I ran background on every school security officer in the district. You were right. They've been using Marshall to clean problems off the record for years, especially students from certain zip codes." Ronda didn't blink. "And the others? Compliant?" "They look the other way. Some afraid. Some just don't care." "What about the principal?" "Delaney? Complicit. I found a private email thread between him and the school board before Nora's incident. They'd flagged her as a potential behavioral liability based on her transfer records. She didn't have any priors. They didn't need them." Ronda's jaw tightened. "They built a case before she even enrolled." "Exactly." She leaned back, staring at the board as if trying to burn a hole through it with her eyes. "They wanted to break her," she said. "And now," Chuck said, "they're trying to bury her." That afternoon, a flash drive arrived anonymously at the front desk of a local newspaper, the San Pinto Journal. It contained a single 47-second video clip. The footage was grainy, but the story was clear. A hallway, a girl in a hoodie, 2 officers, the girl reaching into her locker. A sudden command, "Step away." Hands on her shoulders, a shove, the baton strike, her body crumpling, a second blow, a scream, then silence. The clip cut out abruptly, but it was enough. By evening, it had been posted online by 3 independent bloggers, shared across Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube. The caption read, "This is what they did to a child. Watch, share, demand answers." It went viral in 5 hours. While the town reeled, Rhonda moved in silence. That night, she drove across county lines to a second-rate motel in the hills above Bakersfield, room 208. She knocked once, the door opened a crack. Inside, a man in his late 50s, lean, sharp-eyed, wearing a deputy badge clipped to his belt. His name was Ramon Velez, retired investigator, unofficial, off the books, but still in the loop. He let her in without a word. "You here for justice or headlines?" he asked. "I'm not talking to reporters." "Good." She handed him a flash drive. "Here's everything. Disciplinary records, whistleblower emails, the video, internal documents, timeline, timestamps, police codes. I want it sent to the right people." "You trust me?" "No." "Smart." He plugged it in, brows furrowing as the data spilled across his screen. "This is heavy. I need it heavier." "You'll get it." "And the girl?" "She's stable, for now." He nodded. "I'll start with the DA's office, but you'll have to go public soon." "I know." The next morning, Chuck returned from the hospital with news. She moved her fingers again, opened her eyes, just for a second. Rhonda didn't react, but her hand clenched slightly. "She's fighting," he said. "She shouldn't have had to." Chuck nodded. "So we fight for her." Their next target wasn't a person, it was the system. Rhonda returned to the school with a hidden body cam beneath her jacket. She walked into the administrative office unannounced. Principal Delaney froze the moment he saw her. "I'm here to review safety policy," she said coldly. "You'll show me the last 30 days of security logs." "You don't have clearance. I have a girl in a coma." Delaney paled. She left 40 minutes later with copies of all visitor logs, staff badge entries, and incident reports. Half of them were doctored. Several had been retroactively edited. Timestamps didn't match the paramedic logs. One name, Officer Gilbert, was erased entirely from the day of the incident. Proof. She didn't call the police. She called a hacker. The man worked from a van behind a used tire shop. Young, skinny, former white hat turned gray. He took one look at the drive and whistled. "You're gonna burn a district with this." "I'm not burning anything," she said. "I'm exposing it." Meanwhile, Chuck paid a visit to a teacher, Mr. Patel, the same man who tried to intervene the day Nora was beaten. He found him at a park bench feeding ducks. "You tried to stop it," Chuck said, sitting beside him. "I was told I'd be terminated if I said anything." "And now?" Patel glanced around, lowered his voice. "There's a chain. Everything gets filtered before it goes public. Complaints disappear. Parents are silenced. I've seen it before." Chuck handed him a phone. "Tell your story. It's time." Patel took it. After a long pause, he began. The next day, Rhonda called a press conference. Not in front of the school, not at City Hall. She stood in front of the hospital beside a row of protest signs left by strangers. "Justice for Nora. Stop school violence. Protect our kids." She wore black slacks, a buttoned jacket, no jewelry, no makeup. Her hair was tied back. Her expression was harder than steel. Reporters clustered in front of her, some flown in from as far as Chicago. Cameras rolled, microphones extended. She began. "My name is Ronda Rousey. I am a fighter, an Olympian, a champion, but none of that matters today. What matters," she continued, "is that a 14-year-old girl was beaten into a coma inside her school. by those sworn to protect her. They said she resisted. The video says otherwise. They said it was procedure. I've read the procedure. Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. This was not an isolated incident. This was a pattern, a system, built to punish the quiet ones, the different ones, the ones who don't fit into the mold. She lifted a folder. Inside, records, evidence, video stills, documents. I'm calling for the immediate resignation of Principal Delaney, Sergeant Dean Marshall, Officer Tom Gilbert, and every administrator who helped hide this. I'm demanding a federal investigation into San Pinto School District's use of private policing. And I'm not asking, I'm telling. The cameras clicked. Shouts rang out. She didn't flinch. This is not about revenge. This is about protection. This is about what comes next. She stepped back. Chuck appeared beside her. The image went global. By nightfall, 2 million people had watched the video of Norris beating. By morning, the school's phone lines were jammed. By noon, the governor issued a statement. And Ronda? She sat beside Nora's bed again, holding her hand, waiting, because the real storm hadn't even begun. The night air was thick with the weight of what had been said. The hospital room where Nora lay was dim, cast in the soft blue hue of monitors and machines. Ronda sat beside her, unmoving, her back straight, her fingers gently cradling the girl's hand. The press conference was over, the crowds had dispersed, and the videos had circled the globe, but the war inside this quiet room remained the same. Outside, beyond the windows, the city buzzed with protest. People stood with signs and candles, voices low but determined. They didn't chant. They didn't riot. They simply stayed, a presence, a witness. News vans lined the opposite curb. Reporters still clutched microphones, speaking in hushed tones, as if the story might change if they whispered it differently. Inside, Ronda breathed slowly, matching the rhythm of the beeping monitor. Nora's chest rose and fell in that unnatural tempo dictated by machines, proof of life, but not a living. She had watched this same rise and fall for days, memorized each pattern, each pause, each flutter of the EKG, and still it didn't feel like enough. She spoke softly to the girl, not knowing if the words were heard. "You're not alone anymore. You won't be again." Nora didn't move, but her hand, still encased in Ronda's larger one, twitched, just once. Ronda sat upright, her breath caught. She waited. Another twitch, then the slightest tightening of fingers. Ronda leaned in. "Nora?" The monitor's rhythm changed slightly, not alarmingly, just enough. A nurse's voice called out behind the door and footsteps followed. Ronda didn't move, didn't break eye contact with the bruised, pale face in front of her. Then it happened. Nora's eyes fluttered, not open, not yet awake, but alive. A muscle near her brow twitched, her lips parted. Ronda stood, her voice hoarse. "She's waking up." The nurse entered, followed by another and then a doctor. Ronda stepped back to let them work, but not too far. She watched every gesture, every response. 10 minutes later, after oxygen levels were checked, vitals confirmed, and the breathing tube removed, Nora opened her eyes fully. They were glassy and unfocused at first, like she was underwater, but they moved. They found Ronda, locked on her. Ronda stepped closer again. She knelt by the bed. Nora's lips moved, barely, one syllable. "Mom." Tears filled Ronda's eyes before she realized they were there. She leaned in, her forehead pressing lightly to the girl's temple. A shaky breath escaped her chest. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to break. "You're safe now," she whispered. Doctors hovered behind them, murmuring assessments. Nurses made quiet notes, but Ronda stayed where she was, hands still wrapped gently around Norris. The child's awakening was not a miracle. It was a beginning. And now it was their turn to carry it forward. The next morning, Ronda stood once again in front of the same microphones, the same lenses. This time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood not just Chuck, but teachers who had spoken out, nurses who had come forward, students who had once been silenced. In the crowd, signs rose again, not of outrage, but of resolution. She took the podium calmly, without preamble. "My daughter is awake," she said. No camera flash interrupted her pause. "She is alive. She remembers everything." Gasps rippled through the gathered media. Ronda waited. But this story is not just hers. In the last 48 hours, I've received over 600 messages from families across the country. Parents of children who were harassed, threatened, beaten, all under the protection of school security. Different states, different cities. Same story. She unfolded a stack of letters, holding them high. Her voice did not waver. "I carry their stories now, too." Behind her, Chuck stood silently. He didn't need to speak. His presence was enough, solid, unshakable, the protector behind the protector. "For too long, we've let fear be stronger than truth," Ronda said. "We've let uniforms shield predators and let protocols excuse violence. No more." She paused again. "I was too quiet, but I won't be again." She looked directly into the sea of lenses, eyes like ice. "I'm calling for the full dismantling and restructuring of all private security programs in California schools. No more immunity. No more silence. Civilian oversight. Transparent reporting. Public accountability." A reporter near the front raised his hand. "Some critics say you've gone too far. What do you say to them?" Ronda's answer came instantly. "I say we haven't gone far enough." The words echoed. The microphones captured them. The headlines began to write themselves. Far from San Pinto, in a gray office building in Washington, D.C., a Department of Justice official sat behind a cluttered desk, reading through the petition and supporting documents Ronda had sent days earlier. He read every line, every testimony, every screenshot. When he reached the final page, he set it down and picked up the phone. "Activated," he said. 2 days later, a letter arrived for Ronda. It bore the seal of the Department of Justice. Inside was a single line. "You were right. We're coming." She held the paper in her hands, eyes scanning it once, then again. There was no smile on her face, only confirmation. She stood at the window of her temporary home, looking out over the bruised city, the protests now spreading to neighboring districts. The people had seen what happened. They weren't forgetting. Later that day, she returned to the hospital. Nora's room had changed. Brighter now, less machinery, more space. The girl sat up in bed, thin but alert, her hair combed back, a faint color returning to her cheeks. Ronda entered quietly, pulling a book from her bag. She sat beside her and opened to the page they had last read together before the world fell apart. Her voice was calm as she read, the words awoo and deliberate. Nora leaned against her shoulder, eyes closing again, but this time not from pain, just from peace. The chapter ended. Ronda placed the book on the table. "You did it," she whispered. "You came back." Nora didn't answer. She didn't need to. A few moments passed, then Ronda reached out and gently pushed back a strand of hair from the girl's forehead. "I made them hear you," she said, "but that's not enough, not yet." A nurse entered and checked the monitors. Everything was stable. Everything was holding. That night, Rhonda left the hospital and walked the edge of the protest line, hands in her pockets. People recognized her now, but no one stopped her. They didn't need photos. They needed to know she was still there. The following morning, the governor's office released a formal apology and suspended the district's contract with their private police provider. An independent oversight board was assembled. Investigations were opened. Legal proceedings began. And the footage, now part of federal evidence, could no longer be ignored. But Rhonda knew this was only the first layer. Chuck stood on the rooftop of the hospital beside her that evening, arms crossed. "Back when I was active," he said, "we used to say justice takes time." Rhonda looked out over the horizon where the sun dipped behind the city skyline. "It shouldn't take this long," she said. "No," he agreed, "but sometimes it needs someone to show it the way." They stood in silence, watching the lights flicker on across the town. Ambulances passed below, helicopters moved overhead. The world spun forward. "She's going to make it," Rhonda said at last. "She already has." And then they turned away, descending the stairs together, one step at a time. Not as legends or warriors or public figures, but as two people who had seen the line crossed and decided to push back. Not for spectacle. Not for vengeance. For Nora. For all the ones like her. The city didn't sleep that night, but it woke up different. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe for more. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and don't forget to check out the next story on the channel. You won't want to miss it.